Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Critical race theory theoretical frameworks in discourse analysis. Critical race theory, CRT, offers an expansive range of frameworks that analyze the relationships between race, power, and society. This overview explores pivotal CRT frameworks that enrich discourse analysis, including racial formation theory, whiteness as property, intersectionality, discrit, latcrit, Asiancrit, and tribalcrit. Each framework delves into how racial identities and structures are constructed and maintained through discourse, influencing everything from policy making to individual social interactions. By understanding and applying these theories, discourse analysts can uncover the underlying power dynamics in societal narratives and media, contributing to more informed and equitable social practices. 1. Racial formation theory. Definition and core concepts. Racial projects. Omi and Winant define racial formation through the concept of racial projects, which are representations or interpretations of racial dynamics that connect what race means in particular discursive practices to the broader social structures of society. These projects can reinforce or challenge existing racial hierarchies, depending on how they configure the relationship between social structure and racial representation. The social construction of race. At the heart of racial formation theory is the assertion that race is a social construct, not a biological reality. It emphasizes that race is created and modified over time through political, economic, and social forces, which are often mediated through language and discourse. Application in discourse analysis. Analyzing racial discourses. Racial formation theory invites discourse analysts to examine how language in the media, politics, education, and other societal institutions constructs and contests racial categories. This involves looking at how racial meanings are created, disseminated, and challenged in various texts and talks. Intersection with other identities. The theory also underscores the intersectionality of race with other identities such as gender, class, and sexuality, suggesting that these intersections are crucial for understanding the complexity of racial discourses. It compels analysts to consider how multiple forms of identity and oppression interact within discourses. Implications for understanding social dynamics. Policy and social structure. Implications for racial policies. Understanding how racial categories are formed and transformed is crucial for policymakers and social planners. Racial formation theory provides insights into how policy can inadvertently reinforce racial categories or, conversely, how it can help deconstruct harmful racial classifications. Revising institutional practices. Institutions can use insights from racial formation theory to revise practices that may perpetuate racial inequalities. This includes re-evaluating criteria for affirmative action, educational curricula, and even legal standards that rely on racial categorizations. Cultural representation and identity. Media analysis. Racial formation theory is particularly useful in analyzing media representations of race, helping to reveal how these representations contribute to societal understandings of race. This can involve critiquing stereotypical portrayals or highlighting more nuanced depictions of racial identities. Public discourse and national identity. The theory can also help analyze how race is implicated in national narratives and public discourses about citizenship, belonging, and otherness, which are pivotal in shaping public opinion and social cohesion. Racial formation theory enriches CRT in discourse analysis by providing a framework for critically examining how racial categories are socially constructed and imbued with meaning within discourses. By applying this theory, researchers and analysts can gain deeper insights into the mechanisms by which race is made salient in social interactions and institutional practices, leading to more informed discussions and interventions aimed at addressing racial injustices. 2. Whiteness as property. The concept of whiteness as property, introduced by Cheryl Harris in her seminal 1993 article, profoundly contributes to critical race theory, CRT, and discourse analysis. This theory posits that whiteness has historically been treated as a form of property in the legal, economic, and social systems of the United States, conferring tangible and intangible privileges to those who are racially categorized as white. This framework is critical for understanding how racial advantages are embedded and perpetuated in societal discourse, reinforcing structures of power and privilege. Overview of whiteness as property. Historical and legal foundations. Legal precedents. Harris traces the roots of whiteness as property to laws that historically enforced racial segregation and discrimination, such as those concerning slavery, miscegenation, and immigration. She illustrates how these laws codified racial identity into property rights, thereby institutionalizing white privilege. Economic benefits. The concept also encompasses the economic benefits that have been historically tied to whiteness, from preferential access to employment and education to advantages in buying property and accumulating wealth. Application in discourse analysis. Analyzing legal and political discourse. Discourse analysts can use this framework to explore how legal and political discourses continue to reflect and reinforce the notion of whiteness as a form of property. This might involve analyzing legislation, judicial decisions, or public policy debates to see how they implicitly or explicitly reinforce the privileges associated with whiteness. Media and cultural discourses. Analyzing media representations can reveal how whiteness is constructed as normative and desirable, often at the expense of other racial identities. This analysis can extend to examining how educational materials, entertainment media, and advertising perpetuate the valuation of whiteness. Implications for understanding social dynamics. Privilege and power structures. Social and cultural capital. Whiteness as property isn't limited to material assets but extends to social and cultural capital, where being white often grants individuals presumed competence, credibility, and benefit of the doubt in various social interactions. Intersectionality. This framework can be enriched by considering how whiteness intersects with other identities such as gender, class, and sexuality, affecting how these privileges are distributed and experienced. Challenging and dismantling privileges. Policy implications. Understanding whiteness as property can inform policies aimed at equity and social justice, particularly those designed to dismantle systemic racial advantages in areas like housing, education, and employment. Educational reform. In education, this concept can guide curriculum development and teaching strategies that aim to deconstruct racial hierarchies and promote a more critical understanding of history and social relations. Whiteness as property is a powerful theoretical framework in CRT that offers profound insights into the mechanisms by which racial inequality is constructed and maintained through discourse. By applying this concept, discourse analysts can uncover the often subtle ways in which language and communication reinforce white supremacy and racial hierarchies. This analysis not only deepens our understanding of racial dynamics but also supports efforts to challenge and transform these entrenched structures of power and privilege. 3. Intersectionality. Intersectionality is a foundational framework within critical race theory, CRT, that was developed by Kimberlé Crenshaw. It provides a crucial lens for understanding how various social identities, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, and others, interact and intersect in complex ways, creating unique experiences of discrimination and privilege. Crenshaw introduced this concept to highlight the limitations of single-axis frameworks that address only one form of identity or oppression at a time, which often overlook the multifaceted and interconnected nature of social identities. Overview of intersectionality in discourse analysis. Understanding intersectionality. Origins. Crenshaw's work initially focused on the experiences of Black women, who often found their needs and experiences obscured in both feminist movements, which tended to focus primarily on gender, and anti-racist movements, which focused primarily on race. She argued that the experiences of Black women are shaped by both racial and gender discrimination, creating a distinct intersectional experience that needed explicit recognition. Expansive application. Over time, the concept of intersectionality has been expanded and applied to a range of identities and social inequalities, enriching the analysis of how systemic injustices and social hierarchies operate. Intersectionality in discourse analysis. Analyzing text and talk. Intersectionality encourages discourse analysts to examine how language and communication reflect and reinforce intersecting identities. For example, analyzing political speeches, media coverage, or everyday conversations can reveal how discourse constructs and contextualizes identities, often in overlapping and intersecting ways. Revealing hidden biases. Through intersectional analysis, researchers can uncover subtle biases and forms of discrimination that may not be apparent when viewing identities in isolation. This includes how certain narratives may privilege or marginalize specific groups based on their intersectional identities. Implications for understanding social dynamics. Challenging simplistic narratives, complex identity dynamics. Intersectionality provides a framework for challenging oversimplified or monolithic portrayals of social groups in various discourses. It helps in understanding the complexity of experiences within any given group, recognizing diversity and avoiding stereotypes. Policy and representation. In policy making and cultural representation, applying an intersectional lens ensures that the diverse needs and experiences of all community members are considered, leading to more equitable and effective solutions. Empowerment and advocacy. Empowering marginalized voices. By recognizing the unique challenges faced by individuals at various intersections of identity, intersectionality also informs advocacy strategies that aim to address these specific challenges. Educational and social programs. Intersectionality can guide the development of educational curricula and social programs that address and respect the complexity of identities, promoting inclusivity and awareness. Intersectionality is a powerful theoretical framework within critical race theory that enhances discourse analysis by providing a nuanced understanding of how various forms of identity and oppression intersect and shape individual experiences and societal structures. By applying this framework, scholars and practitioners can better understand the complexity of social identities and the interlocking systems of power that affect individuals in diverse ways. This comprehensive approach not only deepens scholarly inquiry but also informs more just and inclusive practices in policy, education, and broader societal interactions. 4. Discrete, disability critical race theory. Discrete, or disability critical race theory, is a theoretical framework that synergistically combines insights from critical race theory, CRT, and critical disability studies. This innovative approach addresses the intersections of race and disability, focusing on how these identities coalesce to create unique experiences of oppression and marginalization. Discrete highlights the ways in which race and ability are not isolated but are interconnected dimensions that significantly impact the lives of individuals who are simultaneously racialized and disabled. Overview of discrete in discourse analysis. Foundational concepts. Intersection of race and disability. Discrete emphasizes that systems of oppression related to race and disability do not operate independently but are interlinked. This framework investigates how racial and ableist ideologies compound to exacerbate exclusion and discrimination. Challenging normativity. Discrete challenges the normative standards of whiteness and ability that dominate societal discourses, advocating for a broader understanding that includes diverse racial and disability perspectives. Key principles of discrete. Centering the margins. Discrete focuses on the experiences and voices of those at the intersection of race and disability, who often face the compounded effects of ableism and racism. Critiquing traditional frameworks. It critiques traditional legal, educational, and social frameworks that often fail to adequately address the complexity of intersecting oppressions faced by racially marginalized individuals with disabilities. Advocating for intersectional justice. Discrete calls for policies and practices that recognize and address intersectional needs, promoting justice and equity not just along racial lines but also considering disability. Application of Discourse in discourse analysis. Analyzing educational discourses. Educational equity. Discourse is particularly pertinent in analyzing educational discourses, where racial and ableist biases can significantly impact the educational experiences and outcomes for students with disabilities. By applying Discourse, analysts can explore how educational policies, practices, and curricula either perpetuate inequity or help to dismantle it. Representation in curriculum. Discourse encourages the examination of how individuals with intersecting identities are represented in educational materials, advocating for curricula that reflect the diversity of experiences and challenges faced by students at the intersection of race and disability. Media representation and public discourse. Stereotyping and visibility. Discourse provides a framework for analyzing how media portrayals of individuals at the intersection of race and disability either reinforce stereotypes or provide empowering representations. It calls for a critical examination of visibility, voice, and the narratives that are often missing or marginalized in mainstream media. Legislative and social policy discourse. Discourse can also be applied to analyze legislative and policy-making processes to identify how laws and policies address or ignore the complex realities of those affected by both racial and disability-related discrimination. Discourse, or disability critical race theory, enriches discourse analysis by providing a nuanced framework to examine the intersections of race and disability in creating unique forms of marginalization. By focusing on these intersections, Discourse not only broadens the scope of critical race theory but also enhances our understanding of the complexities involved in navigating multiple marginalized identities. This approach encourages a more inclusive examination of discourses across various domains, ensuring that the voices and experiences of those at the margins are recognized and addressed in efforts to promote social justice and equity. 5. Lat-Crit, Latino critical race theory. Latino critical race theory, or Lat-Crit, is a derivative of critical race theory, CRT, that specifically addresses the racial, social, cultural, and legal issues affecting Latino communities. Developed in the mid-1990s, Lat-Crit extends CRT's focus on race and racism to encompass other forms of subordination that affect Latinos, such as immigration status, language barriers, ethnicity, culture, and ideology. Lat-Crit provides a framework for understanding how various forms of identity and structural inequalities intersect to impact Latino communities uniquely. Foundations of Lat-Crit. Scope and focus. Beyond black-white paradigm. Lat-Crit emerged as a response to CRT's primary focus on the black-white racial paradigm, which did not fully address the specific issues faced by Latinos. It incorporates analysis of issues such as colonialism, immigration, nativism, and language rights, which are central to the experiences of Latino communities. Multidimensional analysis. Lat-Crit emphasizes the multidimensionality of Latino identities, incorporating considerations of race, class, gender, and other axes of identity, and examining how these intersecting identities influence access to power and privilege. Key themes in Lat-Crit. Immigration and citizenship. One of the core areas of focus for Lat-Crit is the impact of legal status on individuals' lives, particularly how immigration laws and policies affect Latino communities' access to rights and opportunities. Language and culture. Lat-Crit theorists analyze the role of language as a site of struggle and empowerment, addressing issues related to language rights, bilingual education, and the preservation of cultural heritage. Intersectionality. Building on CRT, Lat-Crit incorporates an intersectional approach to address how multiple forms of oppression interact, particularly in the contexts of race, gender, class, and sexuality within Latino communities. Application of Lat-Crit in discourse analysis. Analyzing educational and legal discourses. Education system. Lat-Crit can be applied to analyze how educational policies and practices impact Latino students, particularly in terms of language accessibility, representation in curriculum, and educational outcomes. Legal system. LAT-CRIT helps in examining how legal discourses and practices around immigration and civil rights address or neglect the specific needs and rights of Latinos. Media representation and public discourse, stereotyping and representation. LAT-CRIT provides a critical lens for analyzing media portrayals of Latinos, scrutinizing how these representations reinforce stereotypes or provide space for diverse and authentic narratives. Public and political discourse. It can be used to examine public and political rhetoric surrounding issues like immigration reform, labor rights, and public health, exploring how these discourses affect and reflect the realities of Latino communities. Latino critical race theory, LAT-CRIT, enriches the discourse analysis within critical race theory by bringing attention to the unique issues faced by Latino communities. By focusing on specific socio-legal issues such as immigration, language rights, and cultural preservation, LAT-CRIT helps unveil the complex layers of discrimination and privilege that affect Latinos in the United States and beyond. This framework encourages a broader and more inclusive examination of how race and ethnicity intersect with other identity markers to shape the experiences and opportunities of diverse populations. Through LAT-CRIT, scholars and practitioners can advocate for policies and practices that more effectively address the needs and rights of Latino communities. 6. Asian CRIT, Asian Critical Race Theory. Asian Critical Race Theory, commonly known as Asian CRIT, is a theoretical framework within critical race theory, CRT, that specifically addresses the experiences and racialization of Asian individuals and communities. This approach explores the unique forms of discrimination and stereotypes that impact these groups, such as the model minority myth, and analyzes how these stereotypes serve both to privilege and to marginalize. Foundations of Asian CRIT. Scope and focus. Unique racialization. Asian CRIT seeks to understand the specific ways in which Asian individuals and communities are racialized in Western contexts. It challenges the monolithic perceptions of Asians and highlights the diversity within Asian communities, including differing national origins, languages, religions, and cultural practices. Challenging stereotypes. A significant focus is on deconstructing stereotypes, such as the model minority myth, which posits Asians as successful, compliant, and less subject to racism. Asian CRIT examines how these stereotypes can obscure real issues of discrimination and socioeconomic disparities within Asian communities. Key themes in Asian CRIT. Model minority myth. This stereotype is critically analyzed for how it creates unrealistic expectations, pressures, and a wedge between Asian communities and other racial minorities. It falsely homogenizes diverse individuals and groups, masking the challenges they face, such as educational and economic disparities, mental health issues, and underrepresentation in certain sectors. Intersectionality. Asian CRIT also incorporates an intersectional approach to understand how race intersects with other identities, gender, class, sexuality, etc., to shape the experiences of Asian individuals uniquely. Foreignness and perpetual otherness. Asian CRIT addresses the themes of foreignness and xenophobia, critically analyzing the perpetual perception of Asians as perpetual foreigners, regardless of their actual citizenship or generational status. Application of Asian CRIT in discourse analysis. Analyzing educational and legal discourses, educational disparities. Asian CRIT can be applied to explore how educational discourses address or ignore the diverse needs of Asian students, including the pressures of the model minority stereotype and issues of underrepresentation in leadership roles within educational settings. Legal and policy implications. The analysis might focus on how immigration laws, civil rights litigation, and workplace regulations impact Asian communities, potentially revealing systemic biases or gaps in protection. Media representation and public discourse. Media stereotyping. Asian CRIT provides a framework for analyzing representations of Asians in media, scrutinizing how films, TV shows, news media, and literature either perpetuate stereotypes or challenge them. It explores the consequences of these portrayals for public perception and the self-perception of Asian individuals. Political rhetoric and public policy. This approach is used to examine how political discourse constructs Asians within national narratives, particularly in discussions around immigration, global politics, and economic competition, and how these narratives impact public policy and community relations. Asian Crit enriches critical race theory by highlighting the specific racialization processes that affect Asian communities, challenging dominant narratives, and revealing the complex dynamics of privilege and marginalization. Through its focus on stereotypes like the model minority myth and issues of foreignness, Asian Crit encourages a deeper understanding of the nuanced ways race and ethnicity shape the experiences of Asians. This framework not only contributes to academic discourse but also has practical implications for improving policies and practices in education, media, and law to better address and represent the diversity within Asian communities. 7. Tribal Crit, Tribal Critical Race Theory. Tribal critical race theory, or tribal crit, is an adaptation of critical race theory that specifically addresses the conditions and experiences of Native Americans and other indigenous peoples. Developed by scholars like Brian Brayboy, tribal crit focuses on how colonialism and its legacy continue to impact indigenous communities, highlighting issues related to sovereignty, self-determination, and the preservation of tribal practices and languages. This framework provides an essential lens for understanding the unique forms of discrimination and systemic issues faced by indigenous populations, particularly in the context of historical and ongoing colonization. Foundations of tribal crit. Core concepts and focus. Colonialism as a pervasive force. Tribal crit posits that colonialism is a central and enduring element in the lives of indigenous peoples, affecting all aspects of their existence from legal status to cultural practices. It examines the ways in which colonial structures and ideologies continue to oppress and marginalize indigenous communities. Sovereignty and self-determination. A significant aspect of tribal crit is its emphasis on the importance of sovereignty and self-determination for indigenous peoples. It critiques how federal and state policies often undermine tribal governance and legal systems, advocating for greater recognition and respect for indigenous sovereignty. Key themes in tribal crit: survivance and resilience. Tribal crit highlights the concepts of survivance and resilience, focusing on how indigenous peoples maintain their cultural practices, languages, and identities despite ongoing colonial pressures and attempts at assimilation. The role of stories and storytelling. Similar to other CRT frameworks, tribal crit values narrative as a powerful tool for preserving history and knowledge. Indigenous storytelling is seen as a critical method for transmitting cultural values and contesting colonially imposed narratives. Intersectionality. Tribal crit incorporates an intersectional analysis to examine how race, class, gender, and other identities intersect with indigenous identity, affecting individuals' experiences of oppression and resistance. Application of tribal crit in discourse analysis. Analyzing educational and legal discourses, educational systems. Tribal crit can be used to analyze how educational policies and curricula represent or misrepresent indigenous histories and cultures. It critiques educational structures that erase or marginalize indigenous perspectives and advocates for curricula that are inclusive of and responsive to indigenous knowledge and pedagogies. Legal and policy frameworks. This framework examines how legal systems enact and enforce policies that impact indigenous rights, land claims, and sovereignty. Discourse analysis under tribal crit might explore the language used in legal decisions and policy documents to understand how these texts reflect or resist colonial legacies. Media representation and public discourse. Challenging stereotypes and misrepresentations. Tribal crit provides a lens for critiquing media portrayals of indigenous peoples, analyzing how these representations perpetuate stereotypes or provide space for authentic indigenous voices. Public and political discourse. Analyzing public and political discourses with a tribal crit perspective involves examining how discussions about environmental policy, land rights, and cultural heritage are framed and how these framings affect indigenous communities. Tribal crit enriches the discourse analysis within critical race theory by focusing on the unique issues faced by indigenous populations, particularly concerning colonialism, sovereignty, and cultural preservation. By applying tribal crit, scholars and practitioners gain a deeper understanding of the systemic challenges and resilience of indigenous communities. This framework not only highlights the specific injustices faced by these communities but also underscores the importance of indigenous knowledge systems and sovereignty in broader societal contexts. Conclusion: the exploration of various CRT frameworks reveals the deep interconnections between race, discourse, and societal structures. From the foundational concepts of racial formation theory to the nuanced critiques of tribal crit, these frameworks collectively provide a robust toolset for analyzing how race-related discourses shape perceptions, policies, and practices across different contexts. By applying these frameworks, researchers and policymakers can better understand and challenge the systemic inequalities embedded within the fabric of society, paving the way for more inclusive and just social environments. Frequently asked questions. What is racial formation theory? Racial formation theory, developed by sociologists Michael Omi and Howard Whiteness, explores how racial identities are created, transformed, and destroyed over time through social, economic, and political processes. It emphasizes that race is a social construct continually shaped by racial projects that link social structures and cultural representations. How is racial formation theory applied in discourse analysis? In discourse analysis, racial formation theory is used to examine how racial categories are constructed and represented in various media and texts. Analysts look at how these representations influence societal understanding of race and contribute to the maintenance or dismantling of racial hierarchies. What does the concept, whiteness as property, entail? Introduced by Cheryl Harris, whiteness as property refers to the historical, legal, and systemic advantages conferred upon white individuals and identities. It treats whiteness as a tangible asset that yields material and social privileges, deeply embedded in legal and cultural norms. How does intersectionality enhance CRT and discourse analysis? Intersectionality, a concept pioneered by Kimberlé Crenshaw, is crucial for understanding how overlapping identities, race, gender, class, etc., contribute to unique experiences of oppression and privilege. In discourse analysis, it helps reveal how different power dynamics intersect in narratives and texts, offering a more comprehensive analysis of social injustice. What is discrit, and how does it relate to CRT? Disability critical race theory, discrit, integrates insights from CRT and disability studies to focus on the intersection of race and disability. It examines how racism and ableism interlock in policies and practices, affecting the lives of individuals who experience both racial and disability-related oppression. What is Lat-Crit, and what issues does it address? Latino critical race theory, Lat-Crit, extends CRT to address the specific experiences and challenges of Latino communities, including issues related to immigration, language rights, ethnicity, and identity. It critically analyzes how legal and social systems perpetuate discrimination against Latino individuals. How does Asian Crit contribute to CRT? Asian critical race theory, Asian Crit, focuses on the experiences of Asian Americans and other Asian diasporas, challenging the model minority myth and other forms of racial stereotyping. It investigates how these narratives affect perceptions and treatment of Asians in various societal sectors. What is tribal crit, and why is it important? Tribal critical race theory, tribal crit, centers on issues relevant to Native Americans and other indigenous groups, emphasizing the impacts of colonization, legal disenfranchisement, and cultural erasure. It advocates for recognizing the sovereignty and rights of indigenous peoples within legal and social frameworks. How do these CRT frameworks influence public policy and social practices? These CRT frameworks provide critical lenses for examining and understanding the complex interactions between race, law, and society. They inform policies by highlighting systemic inequalities and suggesting ways to address these in education, healthcare, legal justice, and employment sectors. What are the implications of using CRT frameworks in media analysis? Applying CRT frameworks in media analysis helps uncover how racial stereotypes and narratives are propagated and challenged in media content. This analysis can guide creators and policymakers in developing more nuanced and equitable representations of race and identity.